Hey Mount Pearl, remember when we asked you to share your hopes and dreams for your future city center? Well, we heard you. We took your ideas and turned them into a 25 to 30-year plan to renew the heart of our city. The Find Your Center City Center Renewal Plan showcases the very best this place has to offer. And it's firmly rooted in the 3 R's: recreation, relaxation, and retail. You really can do it all here. Relax by the river, shop on Commonwealth Avenue and Topsail Road, play in St. David's Park, get down to business in Centennial Square, or take a stroll along the Trailway. Over the coming decades, you're going to see our city come to life with changes that put people first. The Find Your Center City Center Renewal Plan is about making way for active modes of transport. It's about claiming our streets as important public spaces. It's about beautifying our river, trailway, and surrounding areas and celebrating all Centennial Square has to offer. But most of all, it's about you, the citizens of Mount Pearl. Together, let's make a place we can all be proud to call the heart of our city for decades to come. Find your home, find your place, find your center.
There we go. Third time was the charm. So thank you for your patience as we sorted out that technical error. And I just wanted to take a pause before we jump in to discuss the project to acknowledge that there are several members of City Council in the room, including Mayor Aker, Deputy Mayor Locke, Councillor Fry, and Councillor Antle as well. So welcome everybody. And with that said, I'd like to turn the floor over to Mayor Aker, who's just going to say a few words on the project.
Thank you very much, Matthew. And yes, it is my pleasure, ladies and gentlemen, to welcome you on behalf of Mount Pearl City Council. As Matthew said, Deputy Mayor Locke, Councillor Fry, and Councillor Antle have joined us here tonight. And we want to say to everybody that this is not a destination. Finding your center is really all about a journey. A journey is to where we take the core of Mount Pearl, which is an area that's full of recreation amenities, but also it's the environmental heart of the city, aka the Waterford River. And it's an area that was built up many years ago, and it's ripe for a little bit of resurrection and restitution, if you will. So we've partnered with the Grand Concourse, Conservation Corps NL, the Business Innovation Advisory Group of the city, the Waterford Valley Rotary Group, as well as many developers and businesses in the area. And we've used some tools along the way to come up with the draft of what we call Find Your Center. We've used some project websites, online surveys, hotlines, and the like. But it was taking all of your ideas, distilling it down as to, and trying to come up with how we should proceed in terms of intensification in the city of Mount Pearl. So it's our pleasure to attend here tonight and recognize the people who've helped us along the way, which would also include the steering committee, which includes Matthew and Rachel, of course, from Mills and Wright Architecture. But also I'd like to acknowledge our CAO is here today, Dana Spurl, along with our Director of Corporate Services, Cassie Pittman. And we're also joined by other members of the team from the economic development side of it, Jeremy Schwartz, Joshua Jameson, and Brandon Mullins. I think I've covered everybody off. You know, it takes a lot of teamwork to get this done. But what we want to do now going forward is work together and help shape that vision. So tonight's session is about sharing more of the vision, more of the journey that we anticipate over the next few years, a journey of economic development, celebration of the environment, as well as increasing the tax base of Mount Pearl, rooted in the 3 R's as we've come up with the retail, recreation, and relaxation. We want to make sure that if you know anything about Mount Pearl, even though it's a nice place to live, we want you to know where the center of your city is. So findyourcenter.ca gives you more information. Attending this session tonight also gives you a lot of information. We look forward to having your feedback. Once we get through our presentation, I believe that Matthew and Rachel are going to lead. We'll be having a chance and sit down and have a chat and have a Q&A at the end. So on behalf of council, thank you for coming. To all the participants, roll up your sleeves and enjoy the center of our city. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor Aker. Okay, so without further delay, let's get into the discussion of the project. So the way we're kind of structured the next 50 minutes or so is we're going to give a brief presentation, which highlights in a bit more detail the different components of the city center plan. And then we will have a dedicated discussion or question and answer period. So if you have any questions or comments, We kindly ask that you please hold them until we get into the discussion period, or you can certainly feel free to submit them at the bottom of your screen. You'll see the tools that allow you to participate. There's a chat box, a Q&A tool, so you can certainly feel free to pop your questions or comments in there. And when we get to the discussion period, Rachel will be able to read those out. Okay, so the city center plan, as Mayor Akers said, that's what we're here to discuss. And I guess we'll start by asking the big question, you know, what is a city center plan? Why do we do these things, and what are we trying to accomplish here with this document? Well, the goal of the project is to develop a plan which is a comprehensive and strategic document that is used to guide long-term growth of the city center area over a period of 25 to 30 years. It's a vision which sets out the priorities for investment, both public and private, that will encourage transformation and growth for many, many years to come. But perhaps one of the most important aspects of a city center plan is that it defines a set of principles, principles that will guide the transformation of the city center in the desired direction, such that the ultimate vision, the vision which has been defined by council, city staff, and of course residents, that vision can be realized. So this is a look at the study area. It's the area that has been defined as the city center area. It's a little bit of an abstract shape, but it was defined based on resident input as well as location of key features within the city center area, such as St. David's Park, the Waterford River and the Trailway, and important public buildings such as City Hall, Park Place Community Center, and the former Stapleton Road Pool. So for the purposes of this plan and for tonight's discussion, when we say city center area, this is the area that we are referring to. You'll probably recall a few moments ago I suggested that an important aspect of the city center plan is defining the vision for what the city center will become. And the vision, of course, is not ours to craft alone. And we rely upon the expertise of those who know the city the best. It's municipal leaders, city staff, community groups, and residents, those who live and love Mount Pearl. So as Mayor Aker kind of alluded to a moment ago, we did quite a bit of extensive engagement on this project. Actually, it was several months worth of engagement. And you can see that there was a kind of a cluster of key stakeholder groups, which we worked very closely with, city staff and council. Of course, we discussed and met several occasions with those folks. And of course, you residents, you participated or you remember participating in this project back in May or June around this time last year. And we had several different ways for you to get engaged. And what we did is, we collected a lot of feedback, and it was really, really useful feedback. And what we do with that feedback is we take it in, we analyze it, and we use it to develop a set of core guiding principles. And for the city center plan, there were 6 principles in particular, and I think I'd like to take a few moments just to speak to each one of those. The first one is build strong linkages. So what we heard in speaking with all those different user groups is that there's a need or a want to improve vehicular, transit, and active transportation connections, so walking and cycling. I think we all intuitively understand that the city center area contains a lot of really great features, Centennial Square, St. David's Park, the river, the trailway, but these can feel somewhat disjointed and a little bit challenging sometimes to move between. So through this city center plan, we want to create stronger linkages that connect those pieces in an appealing and inviting manner to unify the city center area and to ensure that the experience remains inviting and positive. The second guiding principle is it draws on this planning model called complete streets. And that model recognizes that streets and roads are no longer simply corridors for movement, but in and of themselves, they also serve as distinct public spaces that shape the experience of a place, impact a person's first impressions, and really support social and economic activity. The road network within the city center area traditionally has been, I think, somewhat dominated and geared towards transportation by car, but using elements of the complete streets model, we're proposing to shift to a little bit more of a holistic way of thinking about the streets within the city center area as pedestrian-friendly public spaces. The next guiding principle is about Centennial Square. Centennial Square has the beginnings and makings of a really great downtown. And indeed, when the city polled residents on Facebook, perhaps you responded, the consensus was almost unanimous that a lot of people felt Centennial Square was the downtown or the core of Mount Pearl. There are a lot of excellent things happening there that laid the foundation that we can build upon in this plan to take it to the next level. Obviously, the center of municipal government, City Hall, is there. There's an excellent public gathering or green space right next to City Hall, pedestrian scale, walk-up development, ornamental elements that create a pleasing pedestrian environment like street trees, decorative lights, pedestrian scale paving and benches, those sorts of things. So through further investment in the public realm, we're hoping to build upon that foundation to really bring Centennial Square to the next level. Guiding principle number 4 probably should be guiding principle number 1, because the Waterford River, of course, is one of the really big priorities for this project and a catalyst really for taking it on. The river is a very important feature within the city center area, and something that we heard in our engagement almost from everybody was that the city of Mount Pearl is incredibly fortunate to have this gem running through the heart of its city center. One thing that we've identified as a big challenge to strengthening the relationship between the river and the other parts of the city center area is what we've called a back-on condition, which is happening in a lot of locations along the river. There are lots of examples of development that backs onto the river, essentially turning away and creating a little bit of a feeling of disconnection. And we feel that turning development toward the river can lead to a much more successful integration of the river with other developments within the city center area. Further, of course, we heard loud and clear that we want to ensure whatever happens along the river, it needs to be respectful of the river's natural setting. Nothing should be proposed or permitted that jeopardizes the health of the river and its sensitive environment. After all, it's this amazing natural setting, right in the middle of an evolving urban center that makes the river and river valley truly special and unique. If you think about great city centers, they proudly exclaim, you have arrived. And when you arrive at the city center area in Mount Pearl today, there's very little to acknowledge that you've arrived at a special part of the city, with perhaps the exception of Centennial Square. So we need to do things within the city center area that promote excellence in design, high quality natural and urban spaces, best value public infrastructure, and really just enhance the overall sense of place. And there are a number of ways that we can achieve this, which we will illustrate as we start to go through some of our ideas this evening. And then the final guiding principle is relates to the commercial corridors. I think the nature of the way that Mount Pearl has grown over time has resulted in 2 significant commercial corridors within the city center area, Commonwealth and Topsail. Of the 2, I think Commonwealth is probably the one that most significantly impacts the city center area, as it cuts right through the middle of it. The development along these corridors has been traditionally commercial and has resulted in a little bit of a car-centric development, and that creates an environment that is not always particularly welcoming or inviting to pedestrians. So as we move through some of our ideas today, we will illustrate moves that we are considering that will help to humanize those commercial corridors in the city center area. So those are the big guiding principles, and those are really important parts of the city center plan. And as we mentioned earlier, they were developed very strongly informed by the feedback we received during the public engagement component. So once we have the principles, the next step for us as a consulting team is to understand, how do we apply these? What do these look like in action? So we're about to share some concepts and images, and I think probably if you've been on social media and seen any of the media about this particular project, you've probably seen some of these images. But before we get in there, we just want to kind of let everybody know that these are examples of how the principles may be applied. They are definitely not meant to suggest that this is exactly what will go here. They're not meant to be prescriptive, but more so to illustrate how the principles can be applied. Obviously, there are many factors at play, such as land ownership, economic factors, and all sorts of other external variables that we can't control that will influence precisely how these areas will be developed. But the important thing to remember is that even though the developments themselves may look very different, the principles will remain. As Mayor Aker summed it up perfectly when he said this is a journey, and it starts with making sure we have sound principles to set off on that journey on the right foot. So with that, let's get into the city center plan. So this is kind of a bird's eye view of that same kind of abstract shape we showed you earlier, representing the city center. And I think perhaps the easiest way to kind of review this together this evening would be to kind of journey along from the west to the east. So with that said, and I apologize if it's a little bit difficult to read on the screen, all those labels and stuff, but no need to worry, we'll be kind of zooming in on each of those and touching in a little bit more detail on each one. The first one I wanted to speak about tonight is the what's called the Commonwealth Avenue Bridge upgrade, pedestrian bridge upgrade. If you've ever walked the trailway and come to the point where it intersects with Commonwealth Avenue, you'll know that it is a little bit of a challenging part of the trailway. Commonwealth is obviously a very busy road with multiple lanes of traffic, and for pedestrians or cyclists who are using the trailway, this represents a significant barrier and a break in the continuity. And over time, a number of different solutions have been explored here. Bridges over Commonwealth Avenue, at grade, push button crosswalks, those sorts of things. And you know, for various perfectly logical reasons, some of those ideas haven't gained traction. So in trying to explore other scenarios for this, we kind of, you know, we stumbled upon the city's kind of unofficial asset management plan, which identifies the bridge on Commonwealth Avenue, the one that the river currently flows under, as being slated for replacement. Just like any other piece of infrastructure, these things tend to have useful life cycles, and then they just kind of get old and they need to be upgraded for safety and various reasons like that. And the one on Commonwealth is actually slated to be removed in the mid-2020s, 2026, I believe. And so what we're proposing is that, you know, instead of maybe just taking up what's there and putting back exactly the same, perhaps it's an opportunity to explore a way to not only replace the piece of aging infrastructure, but to kill two birds with one stone and maybe explore a pedestrian underpass or something that allows both traffic on Commonwealth and the trailway to both flow kind of uninhibited. So the next stop on our journey will be Centennial Square, and I'll just click the screen here to zoom in. So this is a 3D model, and just to give everyone a bit of context, this would be Park Avenue up here, and then we've got Commonwealth right here and St. David's Avenue right here. This has been identified as one of the key infill or intensification opportunities within the city center. Mount Pearl has you may or may not know, but Mount Pearl has limited land to grow or expand outward. And indeed, one of its strategic priorities has been intensification. And just to give you a sense of what we're looking at here, the white buildings would be existing buildings and the salmon-y colored ones represent proposed buildings. So you can see that what we're proposing is over time, buildings will fill into the street edge and there will become less of an emphasis on parking. This creates a strong edge and a larger public realm, which allows for features such as sidewalks, tree planting, and amenities such as site furniture, bike racks, those sorts of things. This will create an environment that will be welcoming and comfortable for pedestrians. You'll see that we've introduced a new mid-block crossing that aligns with St. David's Avenue to strengthen the connection between Centennial Square and St. David's Park, two of the key amenities within the city center area. And there's another similar treatment right here on Park Avenue, which is meant to be a direct connection between Centennial Square and the trailway, again, linking up to really important amenities. At this location, which is labeled as number 4, we envision the first of a series of small kiosk or retail nodes that will serve to provide destinations along the trailway, as well as seasonal business opportunities, such as perhaps ice cream in the summer, snowshoe rentals in the winter, that sort of thing. We envision the changes obviously the changes are substantial, and we envision these to happen over time. You know, initially the city may consider installing temporary pop-up kiosks, closing off sections of the street, or parking for pop-up patios or vendors, hosting pedestrian-only days, those sorts of things. In the midterm, we see parking begin to get reconfigured to allow for more generous sidewalks, and small buildings begin to start to establish a little bit of a rhythm to the streetscape and a stronger street edge, as well as opportunities for walk-up retail. And then finally, in the longer term, larger mid-rise buildings begin to fill in. Parking gets incorporated into these new developments, and a series of pedestrian laneways and streetscapes begin to emerge. Continuing along our journey from west to east along the trailway, the next stop is this corner of Topsail and Commonwealth. So just to give you some context again, this would be Mount Pearl Plaza here, labeled as number 2, Commonwealth Avenue up here, and then this would be Topsail on the top of the page. And again, just as a friendly reminder, existing buildings are shown in white, and the salmon-y colored buildings are proposed, and they represent future ideas. This is another area which we identified as infill or intensification opportunity. Most of this property is privately owned. However, in conversation with the landowners, we actually found out that they've been exploring alternative uses and for their properties, and had even gone as far as to hire a consultant to help them come up with a vision. So what we did was we took that consultant's plan and, using new information that we had available, such as topography, floodplain mapping, and of course the new city center area guiding principles, we attempted to develop a new vision for the area. So starting at the river and working our way, I guess, upslope towards Topsail Road, you'll see that we have focused on turning the pattern of development to face the river rather than backing on, as is the case in many places today. So we've introduced a new road right here, which is an element that was in the original concept plan done by the private landowners consultant. And this has an entirely public facing edge, meaning there is no development on the riverside. And this ensures there is a healthy buffer maintained between the developed area and the river. And it protects the natural assets immediately adjacent to it, but also ensures there's no privatization of the river frontage. So basically, that ensures, the river is an asset that belongs to no single person or property owner, and it ensures that that does not become privatized. Within the buffer area, we've introduced a new trail section, which runs parallel to the trailway on the opposite side to provide more pedestrian access to this natural area, as well as connections to surrounding neighborhoods, particularly those that are kind of still developing north of Topsail Road. Development pattern on the site itself steps back from the river with lower density uses next to the road, then medium density towards the middle of the site, and then the higher density buildings along Topsail Road, which makes sense since these areas are already developed. They have greater access to existing services and transportation networks. And again, it also ensures that taller buildings do not block off the views or use of the river or the river valley, ensuring that this natural feature remains a public amenity. And this is just a cross section which kind of illustrates what that would look like if you took an imaginary slice right through that developed land. You can see the river, everything kind of faces the river now instead of backing onto it. And the Waterford River really becomes that kind of shining gem. The next node I wanted to talk about is at the end of Riverview Avenue. So I've switched the camera on you a little bit here, and I apologize for the misalignment. This is Park Avenue up here, and then this is Riverview, and then of course the trailway and the river is indicated in blue. This is again another area which we've identified as an opportunity for infill, but also for the creation of a new kind of premier public space. The river here meanders, as you can see on the screen, and it creates a large natural area between the trailway and the river itself. And this creates an opportunity for a larger intervention, such as a riverside park, an opportunity for people to get down and really enjoy and celebrate the river itself. Of course, those who are familiar with the location will probably recognize that there are several homes currently in this location. So this plan, again, being a long-term vision, is suggesting that the city consider acquiring these properties as or if they become available. And the reason being is that they are located in a floodplain, which is not ideal, especially as we face ongoing challenges with climate change and certainly more frequent weather and storm events that may bring issues such as flooding to the area. So instead, this plan envisions removing those buildings and replacing them with what we call a resilient use. And that's just a fancy way of saying it's a use that, or something that is able to withstand the ebbs and flows of severe weather events such as flooding, and then bounce back without the need to have a whole lot of investment or fully rebuild. And, luckily for us, one of the best resilient uses that you can put in in an area, a sensitive area like a floodplain, is a park system. So that's what we've envisioned here. Another unique opportunity exists in this particular node around the building that's labeled as number 2, which is an existing warehouse on Riverview Avenue. You know, we've had several conversations with the building owner, and he's kind of expressed his support for the plan in principle, and he was very open to exploring new opportunities. We feel that, you know, this building is in a really ideal location, right at the heart of the city center area, directly adjacent to the trailway. And, you know, if this building were to become repurposed or redeveloped in some way, it could really be a significant catalyst for the revitalization of the whole area, and a real solid opportunity to embrace some of our guiding principles. And here's just an artist's kind of rendering of what that could look like if it were to come to fruition. Continuing along, we're heading eastward again along the trailway. So this is an area that is known as Steady Waters. It's one of the few areas where the Waterford River really opens up into a marsh-like area. Not only is it a unique landscape for the Waterford River, it's actually a beautiful area right in the heart of the city center, and an excellent opportunity to allow residents and visitors to explore and learn about the history, the ecology, the nature of the Waterford River Valley. So in this location, we envision an elevated boardwalk structure, kind of like the structure you see on the screen there, which will allow users to actually get right out into that wet area, you know, get right out into it instead of looking at it from the edges. And the beauty of the elevated boardwalk is that it allows for construction to occur with minimal impact on the sensitive marsh-like ecosystem or landscape below. We feel like this would be unlike anything in the province for sure, and would definitely become a signature attraction for Mount Pearl that people would probably come from all over to experience. This is Forest Avenue, and again, this is an area that contains several private homes that are within a floodplain area, just like we discussed previously at Riverview. Once again, we're suggesting that, you know, that's not ideal, and that over time, the city may consider acquiring those homes and removing them from the hazard area and renewing it with a resilient use such as a community garden, which you can see we've shown here at number 3. We understand that there's already the beginning of a successful community garden, but this plan really envisions a renewal or expansion of that existing garden. There's also a pedestrian bridge here labeled as number 4. That's the one that was installed recently by the Rotary Club, which represents one of the few connections along the river or over the river within the city center. So we'd like to maintain that. And of course, we've got the popular Waterford Valley Linear Trail, which comes in here from the right side of the screen, and further new trails, which we talked about on the north side of the river, really kind of animate this whole space by bringing people in from all directions. Twin Falls is further east and is a small secluded natural area where the river forms a gentle waterfall. You can see in the background there. This area, I think, has historically or traditionally been used for swimming and fishing and other passive recreation activities. It really is a hidden gem, and the spectacular natural setting really makes it easy to forget that you're in the center of one of Newfoundland and Labrador's largest municipalities. I mean, you feel like you're just completely secluded and on your own. It's absolutely beautiful. So we don't want to do anything here that takes away from that. And if anything, we envision really light interventions that allow for better accessibility and light programming opportunities that kind of tread softly on the land, such as perhaps a sitting wharf, you know, where you could dangle your feet in the river, and perhaps a grassed picnic area, maybe something as like a set of stairs that allows accessibility down there a little bit easier. And then finally, the final stop on our journey tonight through the city center area is at the easternmost node by the Park Place Community Center. You can probably see the sign for Park Place just in the background there. This is the area where the trailway crosses Park Avenue, and I think it's already a sort of node in the city center area. When you're going along Park, you know, you recognize the landscape boulders and the decorative planters, mature trees. There's a crosswalk there. So I think intuitively and instinctually, it kind of is a natural boundary of the city center area. So building on that, we envision kind of just formalizing it a little bit. so that it becomes a gateway. And again, it sends that message that you have arrived into a special part of the city. And we're envisioning these larger pillars, which kind of correspond with the city's ongoing wayfinding signage program. So it's 7:35. That was a really quick walk through the city center, but we did that deliberately because we want to make sure we have lots of time for questions and discussion. So at this point, I'd like to open the floor up. I'll just remind everybody where the tools are which allow you to participate. Depending what device you're on, you can see that they're shown here. If you'd like to type a question, and Rachel on our end will be happy to read that out. You can do so in the Q&A or the chat. Or if you would like to speak or address the room or anyone who's on the steering committee, feel free to use the raise hand tool. And Rachel can unmute you, and your camera won't come on. So no matter what we do, your camera won't come on, but at least you'll be able to speak to the room instead of submit a question in writing. So with that, I'll turn it over to everybody who's in attendance, see if there are any questions. And if I need to flick back to a different slide, I certainly will.
Okay, we've got Zeta Kavanaugh Taylor who has their hand raised. You should be able to go ahead and unmute there, Zeta.
Okay, hi. Thank you for putting this off tonight. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Zeta. Hi.
Okay, thank you. Thank you to the City of Mount Pearl for putting this off tonight. And your description is very well. You did really good talking there about it and explaining it. It gives a clearer picture. I myself live with a disability, which is multiple sclerosis. I'm a support leader for a multiple sclerosis group. So I deal with a lot of people with wheelchairs, walkers, canes, all that. What have you got in your plan for people that need accessibility? I know when you said about the river there, where you didn't want to change that, and you might put a set of stairs in there to make it accessible. Accessible for somebody in a wheelchair, stairs is not going to be accessible. So I just want to know what is in the plan for people with disabilities, for wheelchairs, like electric wheelchairs, manual wheelchairs, walkers, canes, all of this. That's what I'm looking for.
Sure, thanks, Zeta. And you're right, I did say stairs. And I'm happy to report the only location where we've proposed any stairs currently is at Twin Falls, and that was where I said stairs, and that's because right now it's a really steep slope which you need to scramble down, and there's really, unfortunately, no other way to get down there other than a set of stairs. That said, you know, I'm just going to flick back on to the overall drawing there, and hopefully not to make anyone dizzy. But the beauty of the city center area, the public spaces within the city center area, is that they are already relatively low grade. Grade is oftentimes one of the biggest challenges to accessibility, for sure. So the trailway used to be obviously trains. Trains by their very nature need to have relatively low grades. So the trailway will remain. We're not changing the grade there at all. In terms of improving accessibility along the trailway, we've introduced a number of new connections. You know, we had one down here, which leads up to this development in the Commonwealth Avenue underpass. All of those are envisioned to be accessible. And accessibility, of course, is really important in everything we do because we want we want city centers and cities on a whole to be open and welcoming and inclusive of everybody. That said, you know, in this particular project, we didn't get down to the level of detail such that we can say with 100% confidence that, you know, everything will be 100% accessible. Every development that happens moving forward in the city center area will be, the developer of that property will be responsible for illustrating to the city how they've made provisions in their plans to ensure accessibility and inclusion are of utmost importance. So the principles of accessibility and inclusiveness are in the city center plan. There's actually a whole section on that. I didn't really touch on it tonight in the interest of time, But I can assure you that the principles are embedded in the plan. And as developments happen moving forward, developers will certainly, the onus will be on them to illustrate how they've done their best to ensure accessibility is incorporated in their work.
Thank you very much. That's good. Thank you. I'm glad that it's incorporated in there.
It definitely is. Yeah.
Just the simple. See, people don't understand when we say accessibility. Not all the time, unless you're in that chair or on that with that walker. Just the sidewalk that is not down lower, like it's an edge on it that you got to get up. It's impossible. It's impossible. Yeah. That and like people look at it and might say it's accessible, but it's not accessible. So going forward, I think like if you could get somebody, if you don't already have someone on your committee or on the committees with sitting down with somebody that's actually have a disability in a chair, especially them electric chairs, the canes, walkers, because them electric chairs are very heavy. You just can't take a person and push them in that. They're very heavy. Right. So accessibility, like it's got to be 100% accessible, and this day and age we can make everything very accessibility.
Yeah, I agree completely. And oh no, thank you very much. That's an excellent comment. And I'm just skimming through the report which I have here on my desk. And if you haven't downloaded, I would encourage you to download it from findyourcenter.ca. And if you go to page 91, there's a whole section on what's called universal design. And universal design speaks not only to accessibility in the sense that it, making sure we account for users who have mobility challenges such as wheelchairs or walkers, but universal design is about coming up with designs that suit everybody, the broadest spectrum of the population as possible, and we don't end up having to, segregate or put in special interventions just for people with mobility challenges. Like, there's nothing worse than seeing a ramp tacked onto the front of a building as an afterthought. So we want to make sure that
even like a store, if you're putting a store there, the doorway accessible for the person going in with the wheelchair. The push the button, I've ran into it. I have people that I deal with all the time that they can't reach the button, so they will stop. They will not go to that place. They don't feel welcome. When you don't feel welcome somewhere, you're not going to go back. If you went once, you don't feel welcome. And not feeling welcome to an average person that's got no disability or got limit things, go in, bad service, that's, you're not going to go back. But when you go to somewhere thinking, this is new, it's accessible, they say it's accessible, but I can't reach the button or I can't get in over the sidewalk, then you're not welcome. So that is just all my take on it. But I thank you very much for your answer, and thank you for giving me the time to speak.
Of course, thank you.
You're welcome.
Brandon actually just put a message in the chat box, but it didn't go to the attendees, but he did mention that Inclusion NL was consulted during this process as well. And we've been working actually on a few different projects with the City of Mount Pearl. And I will say that they're great in terms of encouraging consultants and to work with Inclusion NL. So I imagine that moving forward, they would probably do the same when it comes to developers that come in as well. Thanks, Ida.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, and then next we have David Brake. I'm going to go ahead and unmute him.
Hey, David.
Hello. Hear me?
We can, yeah.
Excellent. I really like the overall vision. It shows a lot of promise and it looks very, up to date. But I'm a little concerned, and maybe because it's out of scope, at the missing piece I see here, which is a robust transit system, because densification implies more and more people getting into a space, and you're trying to make it a less car-centric center. But if you draw people into these denser areas, even if you hide the cars, they'll still be there. And if people still have the same proportion of cars as they have had to get used to, the number of cars on the surrounding roads in that area will become unmanageable. But even just finding a place to put the cars is a concern, because underground parking is very expensive, and particularly in the Centennial Square area, I'm not sure, as you get towards the later stages, that there would be room to stick cars behind the buildings. It looks like you have, I think, a laudable aim of almost filling that area with buildings. So for that reason alone, but also for larger reasons, I'd like to know more about how transit can be improved within and going out of that area to enable people to live a less car-centric lifestyle, which seems to be kind of what you're aiming for. Because I mean, to the extent that like the transit options here at the moment are really meager.
Yeah. Okay. I think, yeah, that's definitely a challenging issue. One that's not unique to Mount Pearl. One that's, as you know, as a resident of St. John's. Excuse me, David. I had a frog in my throat there. Transit is an ongoing challenge for a lot of municipalities on the Avalon. I think that within this plan, we have attempted to encourage users to take transit by recommending that bus stops in particular are not necessarily just signs on a hydro pole, as they are in many cases, but that they're developed as nodes, areas that might have protection from the rain, might have an architectural element to their shelter designs, things like that. I think the bigger piece than just bus transit is active transportation, and I think on that front, the plan does a lot to encourage people to not take their car, right? To leave it at home, cycle, walk, explore on foot, because the Mount Pearl City Center area, it may look big on the screen, but it is quite walkable. Rachel and I walked it several times. And this plan envisions even better walking network than what exists today, with new shortcuts and new passes over the bridge and to between different amenities. So the challenge of, so I think on that front, from an active transportation perspective, the plan, I think, is successful in that it will encourage people to not take their car, which will then hopefully take the onus away from the need for things like surface parking and parking garages and underground parking, and, as you said, all those things that are expensive. The plan is not to abolish the car. For sure, we know that lifestyles, that requires a pretty significant shift in the way we live and operate as a society. So even though it looks like we've abolished the parking, particularly in Centennial Square, we've actually distributed the parking. There's a number of parking areas. I won't say they're hidden, but they're at different locations throughout the plan. And again, the idea is that if we can break it up, visually it has less of an impact. And hopefully what it does is it allows people to park at one location and walk from node to node. Again, the idea is to get people out of their cars moving around in the city center. So that's the active transportation side of things. The transit is a real head scratcher. I feel like we didn't consult with Metrobus on this particular project, and I don't have enough experience having worked with Metrobus to understand how they choose routes or what their rationale is for where they put stops. I would assume as the city center area grows and it becomes more dense and it starts to fill up with a critical mass of people, I think the buses and transit follows. I think it goes where people go. So I think, as the city center grows, I feel so too does the transit network. They kind of go hand in hand. And yeah, I think, you know, more people will want to travel to the city center area, which will create a demand for more ways to get to the city center area, including bus demand. So I don't know if that answers your question, David. I certainly tried my best, but does that help? Or
it does, and it's really more of a question for the people around you, the councillors and the mayor, than it is for yourself. I think you've laid out a plan that is, as it were, you know, potentially pedestrians, cyclists, and well, less necessity of cars within the plan itself. But there's still an overarching problem of Mount Pearl in its relationship with the rest of, with, for example, its own shopping areas, and in its relationship with the rest of the Northeast Avalon, which people live in, is still very car-centric in its approach. And buses don't automatically come when there's need. They have to be planned for and budgeted for that to happen, and that's more of an issue for the council than it is for yourselves. But I just thought I need to oh, and last point, the shelter that you showed, while attractive in the diagrams, it wasn't enclosed, and I felt like for 6 months of the year at least, I'd like to have, if there's going to be shelters, and I'd hope there'd be more shelters all around, that they'd be enclosed from the weather. But that's a little technical point. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, David. And I see Deputy Mayor Locke has his hand up. Rachel, you can take yourself off mute, I think, Deputy Mayor, if you want to respond or comment.
Thank you, Matthew. I don't know if this is the forum to get into, but David, I just wanted to respond to David. He brings up some great points about public transit. And David, we have around the council table talked about different options that we explored and looked at. One was our own internal bus system within the city of Mount Pearl. And if somehow we could have, you know, an internal bus system that could somehow connect to the Metro bus, to the larger region, that's one thing that we were looking at. Some jurisdictions in Ontario, and I think it was Hamilton I was reading on right now, they're gone to a Metro bus system that's sort of on demand. Because what we have right now, we have, you know, the routes that go through Mount Pearl are pretty standard, but now it's an on-demand system whereby people use their apps on their phone, and then the buses are directed to those particular areas. But you raise great points about public transit. We have had these discussions around the council table, and we're hoping with the increased intensification, Mayor Dave mentioned this, about increasing the tax base, increasing the population in the area, that may provide opportunity for different modes of transit, maybe, as like I said, an internal bus system or on demand. So all valid points. And if you want to discuss it further, I'd be happy to do so outside of this venue. But thank you for raising that. And thank you, Matthew, for the time.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And thanks again, David. Any other comments or questions come in, Rachel?
Nope, we just have Sandra Milmore has her hand up. You should be able to unmute there, Sandra.
I have, thank you. It's an absolutely beautiful, beautiful plan. I can't wait to see it all come to light. And I do also agree with Commonwealth Avenue down by Piper's down there. That's extremely dangerous, and that's, you know, well warranted. Any idea when that might get started? Because I mean, one of these days, someone's going to actually get clipped down there. It's going to be a bad accident.
Does I wonder if, yeah, I was just going to say, I wonder if one of the members of council wants to respond to that. Mayor Aker?
Yeah, hi, Sandra. Thank you very much for the commentary. You know, that item about a transitway, you know, connecting the trailways, but on council's agenda for at least my 12 years on council, and one of the big stumbling blocks in the past, and it's just like at home, typically is the money, you know, but we're looking at, you know, different options. But clearly, if you look at the center of the city, It includes Commonwealth Avenue, but it extends further to the west, all the way up past the St. David's area, as well as further to the east down towards in the direction of Park Place. So we don't intend to see the city center divided by a 4-lane highway. We intend to join it up. Now, how that happens won't be planned overnight. That's going to take a significant capital contribution, and our engineers have already offered some ingenuity. It may not require a bridge, but it might require, for example, and I'm not saying council's committed to this, Sandra, but it could include an island way, a concrete island where you cross 2 lanes at a time. And then the light that's on Commonwealth Avenue at Park and Ruth would be coordinated so that when you're a pedestrian along the trailway, you press the walk button, but that would also coordinate with the lights there to slow down the traffic. But to make it safer, you'd only go to the island before you cross the next 2 laneways. Do you know where I'm coming from, Sandra?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So that may turn out to be a lot cheaper, but it's been raised before. Perhaps the city was designed from a very car-centric point of view, and one of Mount Pearl's greatest assets in terms of its residential subdivisions and its business community, especially Donovan's, is the roadway network that we have here, both getting in and out of the city. It's rare for somebody to talk about Mount Pearl. It's full of traffic jams like other communities. So it needs to be more than tweaked. We need to make the best of both worlds. And I know the deputy mayor has been a real champion in the past of a transportation study. Matthew's talked about active transportation. We're here tonight to listen and get endorsement, and we'll have to continue this process perhaps over the summer. But there is a way of crossing that roadway. But most people don't follow what we would like them to do, which, by the way, if you go to other communities like Gander, Bishop Falls, you don't always get to cross exactly at the same point in the road. But if there's more people going to be using bikes and more people going to be walking and hiking, as we've seen during the pandemic, I think we can gladly justify somehow. I won't use the word bridge, but we'll be able to bridge Commonwealth Avenue in a safer way. So I'll stand down, and that's my commentary. I don't know if anybody else from council would like to jump in.
Thanks, Mayor Aker.
Councillor Fry, you can go ahead.
Thank you. I just
Sorry.
wanted to just add something further to that, Mayor. Sandra, when we've had a lot of people make a request for a crosswalk there, and we've looked into it because it is a safety issue. I mean, having people go across there 4 lanes of traffic, it's dangerous.
Yeah.
The problem is it's not safe to put a crosswalk there. And this comes from a TAC manual on transportation, and because it's so close to the intersection there, and the sight line that's there, if we put a crosswalk there, it would create a false sense of security for people going across the crosswalk, which could potentially make it more dangerous than what it is. So looking at other ways, and this is something that we've talked about, I guess, on a number of occasions, and trying to find a safe alternative to provide a crossing there. And the bridge is one thing that we looked at doing, but of course it costs so much money. Yeah. And that's not something that you can do just overnight. It has to require planning and planning for capital costs. So I believe, it's definitely something that we will be looking at various options. And like the mayor said, maybe there's another option in between, but just know that this is something that's been on our radar, and we're not just putting a crosswalk there because we don't want to put a crosswalk there. There are truly legitimate safety reasons and safety concerns. So we just had to find another way around it, and we'll get there.
Oh, for sure.
Thank you, Councillor Fry and Mayor Aker, and thank you, Sandra. I'm just looking at the time. I don't see any other raised hands. Rachel, is there anything in the Q&A box, or?
Nope, not that hasn't been addressed.
Okay, excellent. Well, it looks like we're right on schedule. And of course, before we, I'm just going to slip these slides just to make everyone dizzy one last time. And yeah, before we depart for this evening, I'll just take a second to point everyone once again to findyourcenter.ca. If you do have any other questions or comments that come to mind after the fact, feel free to check out that website. That the city has done an excellent job building that. It's got all the information there. The plan itself is there, and as well as contact information for anyone at the city who you can get in touch with if you have any questions. So yeah, please do check that out. And with that said, I will thank everybody, all members of council, Mayor, Deputy Mayor Locke, Councillor Fry, Councillor Antle, as well as everybody who joined us this evening, all the great questions and commentary, especially on a beautiful sunny evening. It means a lot that you made the effort to be here. So thanks again, and enjoy the rest of the evening.
Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, everyone.